Toyota has been building a legacy of excellence for years. From developing hybrid technology to upping the standards of safety and efficiency, Toyota is always innovating, always making progress. And with a superior lineup of in-stock SUVs, including the adventure-ready RAV4 and capable affordable Corolla Cross, you can experience the legacy of Toyota for yourself. Visit buyatoyota.com, the official website for deals, to find out more. Toyota, let's go places.
Hey, it's me, Tyler. Bose open earbuds are stylish. The color, the way it looks almost like an earring, so I feel like it could go with anything. My style is very fun. I feel like I always look like I'm on holiday. I just really like playing around with it and tying it to the music. So yeah, I really feel like the music I'm making right now feels like a holiday, so I want to look like it too. Check out Bose.com for more.
You're listening to 100 Words or Less with Ray Harkins. Greetings one, greetings all. Hope you are doing beautiful on this fine day. I am tense, not going to lie, because here we are in the United States of America, living in the potential election of a authoritarian leader. And I'm not going to sit here in a diatribe because most of you that listen to the show probably, identify in some capacity from a political perspective on the more progressive left side of things. But I'll just say that I'm recording this before the election, so I have no idea how good or bad the next 4 years is going to be. But putting that aside, let us talk about just independent music in general, because that, truthfully, in good times and bad times, it is there for us. And I'm very thankful for that. And I'm thankful for you, the listener of this show. You keep showing up on a week-to-week basis or just listening to episodes that I released like 6 years ago. All of that is incredibly important to me. So thank you, because we care about punk, hardcore, indie rock, emo, whatever it is, as long as it's of the DIY variety. I like to place these people in the context of who they are and why they create what they do. Today is a great discussion with Stin, the bassist from Chat Pile. I had Raygun, the vocalist, probably 2 years ago, maybe about a couple months after they released their first LP. Their new LP called Cool World is out now, and I cannot recommend it any higher. It is so good. And if you like anything sort of noise rock, punk, hardcore, like, you will find enough in it to be like, I really like this band, even though I may not typically like this sort of thing that is a little bit left of center, because, they basically put every genre in the blender. And that's what makes Chat Pile, amongst many other things. But Stin was a great hang. I was able to just have a podcast with him over at the Outbreak Festival. And for those of you that are not aware, I executive produce the Outbreak official podcast. I will include a link in the show notes where you can listen to the podcast. If you like these discussions, you will like those as well. So go ahead and give it a listen. And I also publish those episodes on YouTube. So just a nice little plug there, as it were. And you can also email the show, 100wordspodcast@gmail.com. Love to hear feedback, ideas, questions, concerns, whatever it is that's rattling around in your brain. I also, I recently got a email from a person who was like, hey, I don't keep up with your show on a regular basis, but I just want you to know that when I do, I love it and I listen as regularly as I can. Thank you. I just love to hear that feedback. You can also, for free, $0 whatsoever, go to the Apple Podcast page, leave a rating and review, or if you're listening to it on Spotify, you can leave a rating. Those help out tremendously, and just follow along, because whether or not you're listening to every single episode, I want you to be aware of when we release new episodes. Every Wednesday, I'm like clockwork. I'm very consistent in regards to that. So all of those things can support the show, and just tell friends, after all, that's the best way to hear about anything, frankly. And speaking about hearing stuff, let's talk about our weekly recommendations. I've been doing this for the entire year, and I'm probably going to continue on into 2025 because it's really fun. I just like sharing music that is either new, old, anything in between that I've recently discovered, and I want you to listen to. And the release this week is a band called Trauma Ray. They're from Texas. They're of that whole sort of like, new shoegaze revival, whatever you want to call it. They are exceptionally good. I got to see them once. They actually opened up for another great shoegaze band. I was like waving my hand trying to like figure out an appropriate descriptor for nothing. But anyways, I saw them open for nothing probably last year at some point. They had only a few songs out on the EP. It's really, really good. And the new full length just came out on Dias Records, friend of the show. And it's called Chameleon. It's exceptional. It's, if you like hum, all of that sort of, atmospheric shoegaze stuff, but they add a lot of rock to it because they have three guitars. At least that's when I saw them. I think they had three guitars. Anyways, regardless, the record is called Chameleon. The band is Trauma Ray. And I will include a link in the show notes where I update a weekly playlist where I toss all the recommendations. Whether you've listened to every single episode, it doesn't matter. You can dip in, check out the music in there, and then hopefully you trip across maybe your new favorite band or an old release that you just didn't know about, because that's happens to me all the time. So anyways, that's what we got. So let's talk to Stin from Chat Pile. And like I said, their new record, Cool World, is out now. Exceptional record. So let's talk to Stin. Watching your band from the sidelines and, rooting you guys on because I genuinely like the music you're putting out there. And I know it's been an interesting transition point for you guys to be like, oh, I guess we're like musicians. I guess we're like full time now, whatever that may mean, and just focus on being in a band and, yelling at people and stuff. It feels like it's this, like you're playing with house money, so to speak, or like the calculated optimism where it's just like, we're just going to see how long this goes because, we're grown ass men and the fact that our band is a thing now is wild. Is anything I'm saying there sort of, either landing and or resonating with how you're kind of viewing this, new era of the band, so to speak?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we kind of treat every day as a gift, so to speak, because, we played in music or played in bands for years and years and years, sometimes kind of serious, sometimes barely serious at all. But we've always been involved in art in some way, But, we're from Oklahoma City and we've just always felt like outsiders, like on all scenes, right? And so for us to just like all of a sudden in like middle age to find ourselves in a band that's popular, it just kind of feels like, I don't know. It's like, I was going to say it feels like there's nothing to lose, but I guess that's not necessarily true. We can lose our popularity, but
sure.
But that's the thing is we sort of anticipate that, right? Is like we've been at the bottom before and we never thought we were going to be like anywhere near successful. So the fact that all this, will inevitably fade away or whatever doesn't really mean a whole lot because we've gotten our chance to do our thing already, I mean, we've so exceeded our expectations that like anything that happens at this point is just icing on the cake,
Yeah. And honestly, like, especially the way that not only your music sounds, but like the approach that you guys have to creating art and playing in bands and stuff, as an adult, like you're not like, yes, you're pinning your creativity towards the band, but your identity isn't built up like, dude, I got to be known as like Stim from Chat Pile forever. Like, otherwise, who am I? You're like, no, you're an adult now. Like, you don't need that. I mean, it's exciting that you can be that, but you don't need that for the validation aspect, as opposed to, kids in their 20s that like, oh yeah, the band is my life and I don't have anything outside of that.
No, what's funny is like kind of an opposite thing is happening for me where, I spent so much time like working on the band, touring, with the band, all this stuff that like slowly it is kind of overtaking my identity, but it's not because like I want it to. It's just because it is just sort of what I eat, breathe, and sleep, every single day. And so now I find myself like going to parties or hanging out with friends and stuff. And you start kind of just talking about yourself like one does. And it's all like chat pile related. And it makes me feel so self-conscious because, I feel like I'm going into a situation maybe like bragging about what's going on or whatever. And that's just not the case at all. It's just more like, I literally don't know what else to talk about because that is all that happens in my life now. So it would be kind of nice, honestly, if like that part of my identity were to like recede a little bit and I could be just like a normal dude socially, you know?
Yeah. And that is, it's funny because the self-awareness that you're speaking about is totally true because you, especially too, if you're I mean, yes, when you're interacting with friends, they have a general conception of what band life is like. But if you're interacting with, civilians, you're like, well, yeah, I'm in a band, but like we're not the Foo Fighters. Like this isn't what we're going for. But they just imagine that when you say you're a band.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. It's like when you what do you do for a living? It's like, well, I'm a professional musician, and then they start asking follow-up questions. It can be kind of humiliating when you're talking to a civilian. It's like, oh yeah, it's kind of like heavy metal type music, and then they start wondering if you play like arenas and stuff, and you have to be like, no, I make a very meager wage playing clubs across the country, and this is what I've decided to do with my life.
Right. I do love that concept of the working class band where it's just like, hey, if you are able to make your, like a living off of playing music, like that is cool. But by no stretch of the imagination is it luxurious. And like, yes, of course, it's cool that, when I'm not touring, I can kind of, sit at home and not have to like clock in and clock out. But I'm making just as much money as you, except maybe less based on your profession.
Yeah. Well, and probably putting in more hours too. That's the thing that's really hard to explain to people is that since I manage the band, people don't really, I think a lot of people think like, oh, you're in a band, so you just kind of hang out and play music all day. And it's like, no, actually, I, hold a guitar way less than I ever did a year ago because I'm constantly emailing people.
Totally. Yeah. You're like, do you know what advancing shows is? Yeah. Well, I have to do that like 30 times and email with people. Like, do you want to know how fun guest lists are?
Yeah. I had to hang out in the group chat and be like, hey, can I please get an answer to this question I asked 4 days ago?
Totally. You're like, these are my friends and this is my brother I'm bothering. And this feels weird. Yeah. But do you think that, I guess because of where you guys are all standing in your lives as far as being adults and having, life experience, do you feel that if this happened at a younger age, you would be less equipped or it would obviously just be different? Do you have a perspective on that?
Yeah, it's something that I think about a lot from time to time. And I think the answer probably lies in that it would just be different because I've always been a pretty like responsible person, almost to a fault, I would say. So I couldn't imagine a world where like being really young and just like literally touring all the time and stuff would get me into any trouble. But I do think there are like issues in terms of like, well, first off, like just the fact that we're older and doing this now means that, to some extent, we all already have some financial stability in our lives just because we've been working our whole lives, so that kind of makes things a little easier and takes some of the pressure off in terms of like succeeding, if that makes sense. But I think too, when I was younger, maybe I wasn't as emotionally mature, like in my own relationships and maybe like even the way I saw the world. And, I could see where, living that type of lifestyle and having those like stupid, immature attitudes and stuff would make you make some major mistakes in your life, So I don't know. It's really hard to say, but I do think it's actually kind of a gift for this to be happening to us at this stage in our lives, honestly. I think it just makes the whole thing easier, maybe the one exception being like physically, like how many years do I have left in my knees and stuff, but otherwise I kind of feel like it's a good thing.
Sure. And I this saying always rattles around in my brain when I'm having these conversations too. The idea that youth is wasted on the young, where just because you don't have any perspective because you're young. And then when you're older, the appreciation kind of, hits a little bit differently, sinks in a little bit more because you yourself, you're like, I know what it's like to play in front of, -4 people because like that's, what I experienced most of my life. And now the fact that people care, like it's just that much sweeter.
Oh yeah. I mean, we never take that for granted, and it's a thing that it's funny too, because we'll take smaller bands with us on tour and they get like a little bit of a taste of like, playing bigger rooms with people in it and stuff. And then they have to kind of go back to real life and it's like sucks so bad. They tell us about it and it's like, yeah, like sorry that we sort of got to skip that step a little bit.
Totally. Putting the lens on yourself, were you actually born and raised in Oklahoma City, or where'd you come up?
So I was actually born in California, but my parents moved to Florida when I was like still 1 year old or so. And then I lived in Central Florida from the time I was a baby until about the fourth grade. And then we moved to Oklahoma around that time, and I've lived in Oklahoma ever since. So definitely at this point, I'm a full blown official Okie.
I was gonna say, I was like, do you refer to yourself as an Oklahomian? But no, an Okie sounds way better.
Okie I think is the proper parlance.
Right, like Californian, that rolls off the tongue well, and it's like, yeah, Okie, that, yeah, not Oklahomian. Yeah. That sounds so bizarre. And so I presume that most of your formative memories obviously were happening in Oklahoma City. And I know that most people that experience Oklahoma City is the, stereotypical, not only flyover state, but very few people have much context for what Oklahoma City is. What was your, I guess, experience, growing up and starting to develop an identity and stuff like that?
Well, yeah. So here's the interesting thing, or interesting to me anyway, is that we moved. So we didn't move directly to Oklahoma City. I actually lived in a very small town called Asher, Oklahoma. And I think the population there was right around 500 people or so. And like my class at the time had about 10 or 12 people in it. So my social circle was like incredibly small. Like we lived in a trailer that was like on this hill, and our closest neighbor was probably like 3 or 4 miles away. And this is all pre-internet, so like when you're bored and don't have anything to do, you like truly don't have anything to do, and part of the experience of like growing up there is, being really starved for like culture and some sense of like belonging, because you got to keep in mind. So this would be like the mid 90s, is essentially when this was happening. And, Nirvana was a huge cultural revelation, and like alternative rock and that sort of thing. So all that stuff was peaking around this time, and it really captured my imagination. But there just wasn't really anybody else in my small town that felt the same way, so it felt very alienating. And it was weird. It was like, I used to dream about moving to the city and thinking that there would be like some type of like punk rock scene or something like that I could be a part of. And all my problems would be solved because everybody I would meet would be smart and nice and all these things. And then when we finally did move to Oklahoma City in the late 90s and I got to go to punk shows and stuff, I learned that was not the case.
Right. You're like, I moved from something really small to something somewhat larger, but still so far from what, the cultural epicenter of the country.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's part of it too. Like, because like in Oklahoma City, like in the late 90s, the scene here was like very, at least for people my age, there probably were other things going on that I wasn't aware of, but like, at least for people like in their like teens, early 20s and stuff, it was like Christian punk rock was like the big thing. And the reason for that is just that there were places to play that kind of music. Like all these youth groups and churches and stuff would set up these like coffee houses that were meant to lure in teenagers and entertain them, under the guise of there being like rock and roll and free coffee and all this stuff. But ultimately it was just a device to lure them into the church. That there were multiple places where you could go and see like touring punk bands and touring hardcore bands and all that stuff. It just kind of had this sort of like Christian bent to it,
Sure. And being the Bible.
Yeah, definitely. And on top of that, kind of what I learned is like, well, all these small town hicks that used to pick on me and stuff, well, the same people are going to these shows. They're just wearing different clothing and stuff. It's not like all of a sudden you go to a punk rock show and everyone's all enlightened and cool. It's like people are just going to be people no matter where, what you're doing. So, it was kind of a rude awakening, but very cool at the same time. Like I was like, check this out. I remember when we moved to Oklahoma City when I was in the 10th grade, I remember being so thrilled because within walking distance of my house, there was a Blockbuster Video and a Brahms. And Brahms is like the local fast food chain here. So in my mind, I truly thought that like I was in the big city because I could go rent a movie and buy a hamburger and take it back to my house. So
I mean, that's cultural significance. Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah, it was any port in a storm kind of thing, so I really felt like my life had changed, and then you go to like a bigger high school where there's like, instead of 10 kids in your class, there's a couple hundred, and like next thing you know, it's like you're hanging out with the goth kids or we called it the freak table, and it was just like all the kids that were into like new metal and pop punk and goth and club music and that kind of stuff, so I really did feel like I found some like-minded people.
Sure, absolutely. And even to that point of, the youth group nature that is attached to, many of the shows that happen in the South and even in pockets of, California and other places. I mean, I just like you saying that triggered many memories in my head of being like rolling up to a venue, going to play a show and then having a prayer circle. And I was like, yo, we didn't sign up for this at all. What are we doing here? Like, I mean, we're gonna play a show still, but what was this? This isn't even attached to a church.
Well, I think most kids kind of felt that way too, because it's like, dude, okay, so we used to hang out at this place called the Outer Cafe, and it's like a strip mall out on the far north side of Oklahoma City, and basically they would just open their doors at night and teenagers would just like hang out there. And there was like the more wholesome stuff would be going on inside the club, but the parking lot was where all the action was. And it was kids out there, doing drugs, making out, getting into fights, doing all kinds of stuff, that teenagers do. And it was just kind of like people were just hanging out there, not because of the Christian element. They were just going there because they were bored and there wasn't anything else to do,
Evilgreed.net is the place to buy all of your merch. And when I say all of your merch, if you care about this show and you like heavy, artistic, cool music, you undoubtedly will find so many things, whether it's vinyl, sweatshirts, hoodies, long sleeves. I don't care what it is. Pre-orders. They got a ton of pre-orders as well. Go to evilgreed.net. You will love what they have going on. They're based in Berlin, Germany, but do not let that scare you here in the United States because the shipping rates are very advantageous and you can knock out a lot of your holiday shopping all at one place. And maybe that's only if, your holiday shopping consists of, getting your mom a gold shirt. I'm just kidding about that. But Chatpile, who's on this very episode, they have a store there. We're talking about bands like Brutus, Knocked Loose, labels like Pure Noise, Triple B, Sargent House. The list goes on, but basically you get it. If you like heavy music that is, maybe left of center or, artistic in some capacity, that is what Evil Greed traffics in. And it's run by hardcore kids. They love this music. They just want to get it out to you in a very convenient way. So huge shout out to evilgreed.net and go to their site, shop away, and enjoy what they have to offer. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. November is the time where people start to think about what you're thankful for. Maybe it's your mom, your dad, your friends, your family, just so many people that we can be thankful for. But you also need to point that finger back at yourself and be like, you know what? I'm thankful I'm showing up. I'm thankful I'm doing the work. And that is where therapy has made a world of difference in my life. And I know that it can make a difference in your life as well. So if you have ever thought about starting therapy, you have to give BetterHelp a try because it is so simple. It's all online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and of course, suited to your schedule. All you got to do is fill out a brief questionnaire, and then you get matched to a licensed therapist. And if for whatever reason you're not vibing with that particular therapist, you can switch at no additional charge. So please let the gratitude flow for those around you, but ultimately yourself as well. Because when you're showing up with the best version of yourself, you're going to make everybody else stoked. So visit betterhelp.com/Ray today to get 10% off of your first month. That's betterhelp.com/Ray for 10% off your first month. Give therapy a try. Even if it was something that, clearly the religion aspect you had no interest to you, you would still be like, well, I'm going to go there because obviously it's like I'll get to see bands plug in their guitars and be loud. That's cool.
Yeah.
Did you I guess like get into that while you were also, you know, experimenting with a bunch of other music scenes just because it was obviously right in front of you?
Well, you know, I've always been kind of an old soul in terms of the music I've been into because I just got such a late start on everything, you know, like growing up in rural Oklahoma in the 90s. Just like we didn't even have MTV and stuff like Ron and I. So, you know, we were always behind the curve, like when we would discover stuff. So I would say by the time I was in high school, I was like fully a grunge guy. That was like my whole deal. I was obsessed with like Sub Pop and Nirvana, the whole Seattle scene. Like there's a movie called Hype that came out in 1996. It's a documentary about the Seattle scene. And it kind of, what it's documenting is kind of like how overblown the sort of commercial aspect of that scene was. And then how there was sort of this hangover in the mid 90s because people had been so, exploited essentially in the scene. Right. And Ron and I would watch this movie over and over and over and take notes of all the bands that were in it. And we really got like obsessed with that kind of thing. So here we are like in 1998, 99 or whatever, well past the glory days of grunge. And that was like the flag we were flying big time, you know? So it kind of took like hanging out with some of these like new kids that I was running around with to discover like different kinds of music, you know? Because my idea of like punk rock at the time would have been like Green Day or whatever, right? And I had people that were kind of turning me on to actual underground DIY type music, but it was still very like slow going for me. And I would even go as far as to say that like I wasn't really into the stuff that was current at the time because it just felt very like it just felt so divorced from that whole like Gen X attitude, and that was really what I knew at the time, right? So yeah, but you know, around that time, people were turning me on to like industrial music. I'd never heard industrial music in my entire life. I had a friend who, you know, turned me on to like Sepultura, which I had never heard of before, that kind of thing. And it just kind of all bled into this sort of like miasma of underground, like counterculture stuff. And I just thought it was all cool. I never really like picked a side, if that made sense, you know, at least after my grunge phase, I would say. I was just always kind of like a music guy. I never really absorbed like punk into my identity or, you know, goth or whatever, you know, it was just kind of all the same thing to me in a way.
Sure. And I think based on not only your explanation, but just the fact that you were, because there wasn't a, you know, really distinct scene, like it was this amalgamation to your point of like the, you know, high school lunch table of all the weirdos hanging out together. And it's like, when you don't see, it's like, I can be, you know, a youth crew hardcore kid, or I can be this. And like, yeah, you see shades of it, but to your point, you're just like, well, I like it all. And why can't I, why do I have to like be one thing or the other? Like I can look like, you know, totally. I'm dressing like a hippie, but I'm listening to Obituary and it's fine.
No, literally that was the thing. It was like, we were all into like thrift store clothes and we wore big pants and stuff, but that was like kind of the extent of like the uniform that we would wear, or at least like my little circle of friends. But it was like one thing, like I remember one of the first shows that someone took me to when I first moved to Oklahoma City, was the Queers at this, like DIY spot. And of course, I'm this little like country mouse walking up, and literally it could have been like something out of a movie, like these two huge bodyguards kicking this guy out with these like big purple Liberty spikes and like literally throwing him into the street as we like walk into the venue, you know? So I kind of felt like I was in a police academy movie or something for a second, you know? But you know, you would go to like shows like that and not everybody there looked punk. It was just kind of like the thing, like you would, any port in a storm, you know, it's Oklahoma City. So there's not a huge youth crew thing. There's not a big, street punk scene. The metal scene is like small. So all these people kind of end up at the same places, you know, and it all kind of blends together.
Sure, absolutely. What kind of kid did you find yourself being, like, as you were going to, high school and developing more of, who you are and what you were going to do with your life and stuff like that? Did you, care about school? Were you a sports person? Where'd you land there?
Yeah, I would say like in high school by that time, here's the weird thing is I was a really good student in terms of like my GPA and all that, but I was not involved in high school in any way. Like I never went to sports games. I never went to any extracurricular anything. I think the one thing I did, I went to my prom and even that felt like really weird and awkward to me. I was just at the time like obsessed with music and movies. That was just like the only thing I cared about, like pop culture stuff. And anyone who would get on board with that was kind of like who I would cling to. So my identity was, even if it was kind of like primordial, my identity was still very much wrapped up in like music and that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially, I mean, the idea of when you start to get subsumed by music, it really kind of pushes everything else to the side where you're just like, how can I get more of this? Like whether it's playing in bands or just like simply going to shows, it's like, that's the North Star and everything else kind of falls to the side.
Oh yeah. And I really wanted to know everything. Like it was kind of a goal of mine to be this like encyclopedic, nerd about all types of music. And to some extent I am. I would say I'm more of a like jack of all trades, master of none though, like I know a lot about, or I know a little about like a lot of genres, but I'm not an expert in any particular field. And that's just kind of how I've always been, mainly because my attention is spread so far, with that kind of thing. But it was like, it wasn't just music too. It would be like, the sort of like counterculture attached to it or the history attached to it or the fashion, that kind of stuff. I was just very fascinated by the sort of like spider webs of culture that come out of like underground music, And so I would just try to find anything I could and obsess over it,
Yeah, absolutely. And correct me if I'm wrong, you are the older sibling to your brother that plays drums?
Yes, correct.
Okay. And were you guys, I mean, clearly you play in a band now, but were you guys both getting into this, weirdo music that your parents probably didn't understand at the same time? Like you guys were learning from each other?
Oh, yeah. Well, ironically enough, it was our dad who really encouraged us to get into music. And part of that was, we were living in Asher and didn't have anything to do. So I think he's sitting around watching his sons like watch 9 hours of TV a day and, eat ice cream and stuff. And he's like, oh my God, I've got to do something here. So he got us a pawn shop, guitar, and then like a used drum kit. And Aaron took to the drums and I just started playing guitar and we would just sit in the garage and like play constantly. That's like, we basically taught each other how to play. And then we found some kids in the small town actually, that, one kid wanted to sing, another kid wanted to play guitar. And so we formed like a little punk rock band when we were in Asher and we just played in the garage. We played one show. It was in this small town called Duncan, Oklahoma. We played the Duncan, Oklahoma Punk Fest. And it took place in the stockyards of this town. And we played literally to maybe 15 locals and then everybody's parents. And that was like the entire show, So my dad was really hands-on and encouraging of like the type of music and stuff that we, he maybe didn't understand it, but he loved that we had like a passion of any kind that we were pursuing, And so I don't think I have ever played in a band that Ron was not in. Like we have always played together. He's done some stuff on his own, but like as far as like my musical past goes, I don't think I've ever done a project without him.
Yeah, no, that's really that. It's just cool that even if parents don't understand necessarily like what their kids are like, they understand maybe the broad strokes of it, but they don't understand, all the nuances and subculture lingo or what have you. But they saw the fact that you were into this and just, playing with each other. It's like, hey, this ultimately is a positive thing. Even if I don't understand every, if I think they sound terrible, or like, that's fine. It doesn't matter. The kids are into it.
Oh, he loved it. True. Like, in fact, a memory of my dad. So he worked for the Air Force. He like had a desk job there, and he would come home. He would like find tabs of like alt rock songs and print them off at work and bring them home for us to learn, because we didn't have, computer at home or whatever. And so he would do stuff like that. And he bought us a little 4-track recorder so that we could learn how to like record the little jams and stuff that we did. And it's like, to this day, he doesn't quite get the nuances of sort of like the stuff that we're into, but he could not be more supportive and happy about Chat Pile and any other band that we've ever been in.
That's really, really cool.
Yeah.
And what was the proverbial, life path from a career/job perspective? Like, were you expected to, go into whatever your parents did for work? Like, what was the pull there?
Really, the only expectation was that I go to college. It didn't matter what the hell I did. I just had to get a degree was like really the rule. And so I did just that. I went to a commuter school here in North Oklahoma City, and cranked out a journalism degree in like 3 years. And,
oh, wow.
Yeah. And I didn't pick it out of any type of like passion or anything. It was just sort of like, I was pretty decent at writing, and it just seemed to be where like all the cooler kids were, like all the journalism students were like kind of more my speed. So I just literally gravitated towards it. And then like another aspect of it is, like, when you're in your, like the earlier part of school, it's like you have to write all these long essays and these huge papers and stuff, right? And journalism is like the opposite. They're literally trying to get you to put the most information in the least amount of words possible. I was like, well, I can do this. You mean instead of a 30-page paper, I can I literally give you 3 paragraphs and I pass? Cool. Like, let's do this,
Right. No, I love that idea where it's like, yeah, we want you got 500 words. Like, this is what you're doing, as opposed to, 7 pages.
And that was the thing too. It's like my whole life, I've never been like, oh man, I really want to get into, I really want to be a mathematician, or I want to be a doctor. Like I just want to kind of survive, like I truly have never understood the idea of people like forming their identity, like with their job. And it's been a very huge existential struggle for me, as I've spent most of my life working in offices and stuff. And you see people who that's like the only thing they have in their life, and it's so hard for me to relate, because, you go work for some corporation or something, and they almost want you to be enthusiastic about making that company more money or whatever. And it's like, why should I ever give a shit if, this company moves more units or they have a better year or whatever? Like I'm like stuck in prison essentially for 40 hours a day. Why would I want to do anything to help these people,
So totally. Just the conceit of you're being a good team player and this is part of the whole thing. And just be like, yeah, but like I'm literally paid the same amount whether you succeed or fail. Do I care? I mean, yes, I understand the concept of not having a job if this whole company fails. Yeah, totally. That's just silly.
That's kind of my thing. Like, I'm here to do as much as I like as little as I can and not get yelled at, or maybe even not get noticed would be like the best part of it. I can just slip in and out of here without anybody like bothering me.
But totally.
But my journalism degree, weirdly, so I just kind of fell into this like PR job for the Oklahoma Tourism and Recreation Department after I graduated. And it was honestly like one of the coolest jobs I've ever had, because my job was is basically to be like a liaison to any type of like travel media that would want to come to Oklahoma and write stories about like things to do here. So journalists would like fly in, and I would just like take them on tours of like all these different rural areas and stuff. And it was really cool because I got to basically be in a car all day looking at weird countrysides and eating at bizarre restaurants and staying at weird, like, bed and breakfast type spots and all that kind of thing. And I did that for a long time, and it was really great. It didn't pay very well, but it was a really fun, cool job.
Yeah, no, that sounds incredible, where you were able to be this, this like ambassador, troubadour, whatever you want to call. I mean, you weren't playing music for them per se, but just the idea of being able to showcase what makes the city cool. Like that's a really heartening thing that you could do.
Yeah, well, and it obviously like has stuck with me forever. Like it changed me. It made me like very much like into regional identity and stuff. I mean, obviously it's a big part of the band too, right? Like we really, really hit the Oklahoma thing hard. Like part of it's because it's all we know and it's who we are. But part of it is because like I was truly indoctrinated to what this state has to offer, at kind of a very formative time in my life. And I have kind of a like really bizarre, passionate love-hate relationship with it,
Yeah. And I think honestly, like hearing you explain that, there is that mentality in the way that the band has always been so clear about not only where you're from. And I think especially because the internet has flattened culture to where it's so difficult to even tell where bands are from. And going way back to what you're talking about, the regionality of bands from Seattle and Sub Pop, like you just become so enamored with that. And then for you to, it's so cool.
Well, yeah, sorry, not to cut you off, but yeah, I mean, I'm glad you bring that because like the whole Sub Pop model like ruled my life. I mean, I've been obsessed with it because that was their whole thing, right? Is like they found a way to sort of like package this music together and make it like not only just like it was the biggest thing in the world culturally. It might in fact be like the last real moment of like rock history, right? And it's all because these guys got together and found a way to basically package their local surroundings into this like unique marketing angle. They had, all the album covers had basically the same graphic design, the same font. They make up these stories about how everybody in their town, who's making this like particular sludgy type of music are these like lumberjack, losers and stuff. And I don't know. There was just something about like that ability to manipulate the narrative of this scene was so fascinating to me. And I've kind of just kept that lesson with me my whole life, and it's not to say that like there's anything inauthentic about what we're presenting with Chat Pile, but I am extremely aware that the fact that we're from the middle of nowhere is very like exotic and alluring to people. And I feel like it's something that, we should, wear on our sleeves because it's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it sets you apart, like even before, I mean, usually people listen to music first, but like once you combine the, eccentric styles you're putting together from a musical perspective, and then on top of that being like, yo, they're from Oklahoma. Like, it sounds like they should have been from Brooklyn. It's like, oh no, we're from, the swamps of Oklahoma. It's like, it makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I think it helps also excuse the fact that we're all like pudgy middle-aged guys and stuff too, like it helps that narrative out a little bit because people see us and, like obviously we're not like sexy rock stars. We're just normal looking people. But because of the Oklahoma angle, people think that's cool or like at least think it's like novel, which works in our favor too. So yeah, it's just, I don't know. It all kind of works together in a little ecosystem of, weirdness like that.
Totally. I just love that concept too. Where, I mean, people joke around where it's like the, attractive comedian, like people are just like, oh no, they can't be attractive. Cause like, you gotta be funny. And it's like, I can't imagine you guys like all looking like these, chiseled human beings and then being like, oh yeah, we're from Oklahoma. People are like, you're liars. You're not from Oklahoma.
I wonder what would our lives be like though? I do wonder, like, if we were all like these like gorgeous model guys doing everything else exactly the same, like, would we be twice as popular or would people not like us?
I mean, it's a great thought experiment. And I think you can probably like extrapolate the idea of being like, all right, for one album cycle, we're going to lean into the bit of being just like, total fitness humans. I mean, you could, whatever, take a page out of the, the armed, the armed narrative, it just see how people react. And it's like, but it would even be funnier if you didn't even address it as well, where it's like people ask you questions and you're like, what? Yeah, just, ate a little bit less. That's all.
Yeah. We like don't play a show for a year. We don't do any press or anything. And then we emerge and we're all just like absolutely shredded. That would be awesome.
Our friends at rockabilia.com, they understand the assignment because they have really, really cool limited edition merch printed on amazingly high quality garments. And on top of that all, it's officially licensed. So why do you need to care about this? Well, first of all, you need to care about it because I'm going to give you 10% off by using this promo code 100 words or less. Now, I know you've heard me talk about Rockabilia for years now, but let this be the day that you go to their site and are like, oh my gosh, like they've got really cool, cheap merch that's like under $10 because they got to clear this out. Or they have a limited edition ghost lunchbox and shirt, or they have a limited edition, limited to 138 silkscreen poster for the Misfits. I mean, I could go on, but you get it now because you are looking at Rockabilia as I'm speaking to you and being like, dude, Ray, you weren't lying. This is really cool. It ships in the Midwest here in the United States, independently owned and operated for over 30 years, and they have over 500,000 items for you to browse and enjoy. And this is a great spot to get gifts for your friends, your family, any music lover in your life, because they run the gamut from everything, metal, hardcore, but then they go all the way up to, Grateful Dead and Bob Marley and all that stuff. So rockabilia.com, promo code is 100 words or less, 10% off your entire order. Go browse now.
Something that this is very random, but it struck me where you guys, and tell me how much truth there is to this, where you don't do set lists. Like that's an actual thing, or is that just something that occasionally you don't do set lists?
No, we have never used a set list. So even like our biggest show, like we played Roadburn in front of 3,000 people or whatever, we just went up there and winged it.
Which is absolutely insane, not only from, just from a logistical perspective of just being like, like trying to look somewhat professional, but then obviously all you guys go back to the drum kit and be like, yeah, we're going to play Y right now.
Literally, that's how it is. But part of that's like, it's so on purpose though, because everything is so professional and it sucks. Like, I don't know. It's like, again, I've been like a music nerd my whole life, and I have gone to so many shows, but from the lowest rung DIY basement stuff to like stadium shows, all that stuff, right? And as time goes on, things just get so much more streamlined and predictable, and I don't know. I think it's killing some of the magic of of what rock music is all about, And I'm sure it would be to our advantage. Like, for instance, one of the disadvantages of like not having a set list is that you have to know how to play every song. So like when we get together and practice for a tour, we have to sit there and blast through every goddamn song and like get good at it, or at least good enough. And, that's kind of a disadvantage too, is that like sometimes we're up there playing stuff that we're a little shaky on to begin with, but that tightrope is like part of the fun to us. And what we're really trying to do too is just like remove any bit of pretense from our performance, because, like in the sort of like, I don't know what you would call it, like the sort of like arty metal world, like that circle that we kind of run in, there is a lot of like pomp and theatrics and stuff on stage. And that's great for some people. But when every single band is doing that, I think it just kind of makes it feel like a little inauthentic to me. And I think it's important for us to just get up there and be ourselves and just like put on a show, no costumes, no posturing, no lasers or any of that bullshit, just like trying to rock out as much as we can. And hopefully that translates, So we're kind of trying to remove any, again, like pretense is the word that keeps coming to mind. Like we really want there to be like an element of spontaneity that with our shows, and again, sometimes maybe maybe people see us and they're like, damn, that was the loosest shit I've ever seen, and that sucks.
Right.
And I wouldn't fault anybody for feeling that way. But hopefully most people get up there and see like, oh, those guys just got up there and like whipped ass, and that was the show,
Sure. And another word that I would use is artifice, like that idea of, showing up in the same clothes that you wore all day and then playing a show. Like, that's like cool. And like, I define that as normal. But then, yeah, once you start to be like, all right, here's my, black on black stage clothes. And like, even those little things, like that's all intentional and trying to make yourself look, either look better, look more professional, whatever it is. But yeah, you guys are just like stripping it to the bone. We're just like, hey, you may be confused. Like we're headlining, but we kind of look like a local band. What do you think?
Yeah, no, quite literally. And well, here's the other thing too, is that we would just be incapable of having like a really thought out stage show too, because like, I mean, trying to get Ray Gun to do something where there's like calculated steps or what, it's literally never going to happen. Like, or like a sampler that plays like a song while we're tuning or any of that. It's just like we are like mentally and physically incapable of pulling that off. It just has to be us. Like getting there is half the battle sometimes,
Sure. Totally. So when you started to, I mean, I know before Chat Pile, you played in a lot of bands, as we were talking about before. When you started to experience, touring and life on the road and everything like that, was that something that struck you as you enjoyed? It was, very easy for you, or was that an adjustment?
That's interesting because it was an adjustment, but it was a really easy one because I had so much anxiety about being gone for that long. And like, I am a creature of habit, at least in terms of like sleep. I really hate nothing more than like sleep deprivation. I don't think there's anything romantic about it or cool. It just sucks. It makes you feel bad and it gives you anxiety and stuff. So I was just like really worried about like not having the same bed to sleep in every night and constantly being on the run and eating like shit. And all that stuff still happens, but now I know that I can handle it and that it can also be a little bit fun too.
Right.
So there was a lot of like trepidation and anxiety at first, but I feel like we all just like acclimated to it immediately. And now we're like looking forward to it. Like the idea of being on the road for like 3 or 4 weeks honestly sounds like really fun. Whereas maybe like a couple years ago, it seemed like a really daunting task, Part of that too is that, we were planning our own tours and like handling all the logistics. So there's always that anxiety that comes with it as well. It's just like making sure things don't fall apart at any given moment. But now that we've got the hang of like these sort of long form tours and everything, it's fun. Like we really love it.
That's awesome. Especially too, where and maybe this comes with the experience that people have like when they're older and they have toured or not even toured, but just traveled and like seen more of the world, that, like the bare minimum of things that will make you feel comfortable, where it's just like, yo, let me find a good coffee place. Like, I gotta have a bench in the van or whatever, like just those little creature comforts that make it so much easier for you.
Oh yeah. And every single time we do it, we learn something new and it gets just like a little easier and a little easier. So yeah, absolutely. And, the other thing too is that like we're all friends first and foremost, even before like being in a band. So like we really don't get tired of hanging out that much. I mean, obviously there are times where you're just like, damn, dude, I've seen your face for 3 weeks straight. It would be nice to have like a night to myself. But, for the most part, we're goofing off and having a great time, like the whole run, and we have a really, really great tour manager. Well, we have 2 great tour managers, one in the overseas and then one here. But like, for instance, our buddy Paul, who manages our tours, like it's always a like fun time hanging out with him and getting to see him and stuff too. And Toby over in the UK. So yeah, it's just, we have a good little crew and everyone's got a pretty good attitude and we just have fun.
That's awesome. That's great. And on the idea of, you guys are clearly huge film heads and, like you're mentioning Blockbuster Video, like that was my first job and I would probably still be working there if it was still around. But, that connection between, whatever, punk, hardcore, metal, and then film, like it seems so directly entwined with one another. When was your first, exposure of you starting to be like, oh, I actually really do like movies and like the really weird stuff, or, the stuff that, I gotta go to independent movie stores and not your Blockbuster Video because they don't stock it.
Well, the whole movie thing kind of started for me because so my parents were really not into like art and music and stuff for the most part. Like my growing up, it just like wasn't really a thing. But at some point, something like a flip switched in the 90s, like early 90s, where my parents, my mom in particular, would like rent every single movie that came out every week. And so there were no rules as to what we were not allowed to watch or allowed to watch. Like, it was just like anything goes. If mom's watching the movie, you get to sit down and watch it too. And in that time period, I mean, from the years like 1993 to 1997, it's possible that I've seen every single theatrical released movie, when it came out. And so it was really like a formative time, But of course, the movies that they were, she would rent would be kind of more like mainstream fare, It wasn't until a little bit later, like I think I might have been in the 9th grade. I had a cousin who was kind of cool, and she hung out with us one time and rented Mallrats of all movies. Nice. And it blew my mind at the time, because I'd never, I know in hindsight, Kevin Smith, those movies don't stand up very well. But at the time, as a young person, I couldn't believe the information that was being imprinted on my brain, and I was like, oh, there are like movies that like people don't know about that are really good that I should like hunt down and try to watch. And that was kind of like the real demarcation point for me, where I started hunting down kind of more, left of center kind of movies, and I would say that like my purview back then was definitely more like comedy and, foreign movies, stuff like that. It wasn't until a little bit later on in high school I started making horror movie friends, and then I got really into like horror movies and stuff. And now that's like Ray Gunn and Luther Manhole. That's like their deal. They are the horror dudes like through and through, can tell you every release that comes out. I have kind of fallen off the map a little bit. In fact, I've kind of fallen off of movies in general, compared to the other guys. Like, so actually when I was a journalism major, like I told you earlier, I minored in film studies, and something about that experience kind of turned me off of movies to an extent. I think just like the incredible amount of analysis and learning about how, like, what a group effort making a movie is, and how they're like auteur theory is kind of bullshit and all that stuff, just kind of like made me fall out of love with movies to a certain extent. So I kind of swing back and forth on all that stuff, but thanks to the other guys in chat pile, I definitely keep up to date on the weirder stuff going on in the movie world.
Sure. I appreciate that description of, if you love something and then sometimes it gets, super intellectualized and just chokes the fun out of it. Like I know, I mean, advice was shared to me at one point in my life where it's like, you like music so much, like you're going to fall out of love with it because you're like so obsessed with it or whatever. And you can totally understand where it's like, yeah, certain people do run into that wall where it's just like, yeah, this is, kind of choke the fun out of it. So like, maybe I need to put it on the bench for a little bit and then maybe it'll come back.
I think something else, that I learned with all that stuff too, is just that like a lot of the stuff is boring. A lot of the great work, like cinematic works of art, are snoozes. Like, maybe I'm just a moron, but like 8.5 to me, sorry, not a fun time. It feels like homework, at a certain point. I just kind of feel like people get up their own asses a little bit with that kind of stuff. And the other thing too is like any type of like critical analysis where you're trying to read into like what the director or what an artist was what their intention was with their art. It's all imaginative. It's like D&D or something. You just like watch something and then you project your own interpretation of it. And that's like critical analysis and should be studied. I'm like, no, it's just you making stuff up, like assuming the intent of the director or whatever. I mean, we see it now, like as a band, right? It's like you see people like interpret the music you put out and they're like so far off from what the reality or the intent of the song is or whatever. And it's like 10 times worse when it comes to like movie analysis, So yeah, sometimes it's best not to peek behind the curtain,
Right. And kind of on that tip too, like you mentioned previously, the, management of the band and like handling the business. And, maybe I'm using that in air quotes because when even though yes, there is business implications because you guys obviously are living off of it now. Business can mean like ordering shirts or whatever.
Yeah.
How have you enjoyed that experience of kind of like learning how to, run a band more professionally than you had in the past? Or was this foisted upon you and you've had to do it because of, just responsibilities landing on certain people's desks?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a combination of all that stuff. I mean, I don't mind being the one who handles it. I feel like I'm kind of the only one who can in a certain way. But yeah, I'm learning so many things, like just things, because it's not just like you're learning about how to manage a band or whatever. It's like you're learning how to manage a small business, like basically I'm learning how to like run a t-shirt company, and there's like a lot of elements involved with that, like especially like stuff that like I'm not a math guy whatsoever, and like the accounting and taxes and all that kind of stuff is whipping my ass. And so there's certain parts of it that truly suck, but there's other parts of it that are like really fun, like getting to work with artists who do design work for you, or I get to work on all the like artwork for the records. I actually think that planning out the social media stuff is kind of fun, as like twisted and weird as that is. So, there's like kind of behind the scenes stuff that I really, really enjoy, and maybe like 20% of it that I wish I had nothing to do with.
Right. And it's funny because it does, to your point, it reveals itself in waves where it's like different levels of video games where all of a sudden you like level up and you're like, wait, I have to care about this now? Like, this is the thing?
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, and there's like lots of like weird hidden things that you wouldn't ever even expect. Like, sometimes I feel guilt because we talk about like the success of this band as if we're like, Bruce Springsteen or something. I mean, it's on such a small level, relatively speaking, right? But you do get to like at least the level that we are, where we have some visibility, and like people want a piece of it. Like our DMs and our inbox and stuff fills up with just like the weirdest people trying to like angle in their piece of the pie and stuff, and like shooing that stuff away all day long really eats away at like my psyche. I wish there was like a filter I could put on my email or something, or like someone we could hire to just like be gone, vulture, that kind of thing. But yeah, it's interesting, man. I mean, definitely it is a learn as I go process, and I'm sure there's like stuff I could be doing so much better. And sometimes I even wonder, it's like, would we be more successful if like someone who knew what they were doing was actually managing this band? But the people I have to work with closely seem to like the job I do, so I'm not going to beat myself up too much about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And plus, I mean, if you do run into a point where it's completely above your pay grade and you're just like, I can't handle this anymore, like there's probably someone in your orbit that will be able to assist you, so you're not just completely flopping around on your own.
Oh yeah. I mean, I almost feel like we're getting on the verge of that, because like it is getting to a point now where I was kind of complaining about it earlier. It's like the amount of time I spend just on the management side of stuff, like completely just annihilates like the creative time to like work on new material and, record stuff or get the guys together for practice, all that stuff. I mean, even like right now, for instance, we're a week away from our album coming out, and, there's like lots of media requests, and every other day I get some like new photo requests that I've got to quickly get the guys together, and we got to take photos and stuff. And again, I'm sure some people are listening to this being like, oh, woe is me or whatever, but yeah, it does suck when you're like, hey guys, we're going to get together and write some songs tonight. And then the next thing you're like, no, actually we're going to go around and take promo photos again for the 10th time this week,
Totally. Where's another semi-interesting location that isn't just, fields, buildings? Like, is there anything else? No,
dude,
we've done that already.
Even know how many different angles of my backyard we have exploited. Like, I'm running out. Like, we're gonna have to start getting on the roof, but to make the backyard not look like the same photo every single time.
Yeah, it's like if anybody's actually tracking it, to be like, wait a minute, this looks really similar.
I'm like, I
Um,
don't even own enough shirts, to like, to vary up that part of it too.
Oh, totally. And it's like the idea of wanting to be intentional with, what you're wearing as far as like, oh yeah, like I got to make sure that I'm not wearing, the same band shirt in every single photo. To be like, wait, did I wear this striped shirt like 14 times? Man, I got to figure something else out.
Yeah, I think we've gotten to a point where we don't get precious about that stuff anymore. It's just kind of like, yeah, these look different than the last ones. Everything else does not matter. Here you go. And like, I've even gotten to the point now, because back in the day, you like you see a picture of yourself and you'd be like, oh God, I look terrible. We can't use that picture. And now I'm like, who cares? Like, just, it's a picture. Let's go. Let's move on to the next one,
Right. That's one person's opinion, and that person's opinion is myself. And I'm not a good judge of character or looks. Like, this is bad.
Yeah.
So the last thing I wanted to hit on was the idea that, I mean, now that you are at the precipice of obviously releasing, more new music and being able to do these cool things, whether it's, the score that you did to the film and just being able to do more that you never would have been able to, because obviously there's, more notoriety attached to the band. If you were to provide a kind of a punch list in your brain of being like, dude, it would be great if we got to go to, Australia or whatever. Like, what are your, personal goals of something that would excite you? It doesn't even have to be touring related. It can be anything from that side of things.
Yeah, it's kind of like I was talking about earlier. It's like we've so far exceeded any expectations that we had with this that like anything that comes along now just feels like just a true cherry on top type scenario. But like you brought up actually Australia, that's something that we're trying to kind of angle. We want to go to Japan. We think that would be really cool. But here's like a weird one. A goal for me would just to be like to go to a real recording studio and record a regular recording instead of the way that we have done it up to this point. Now, I have a lot of fear about that because I don't want to ruin the magic of what Chat Pile does. But I do think that it would be very interesting for people to hear what we sound like in a more hi-fi setting, because I do think that we are interesting in that way too. So I think maybe one of these days, like going and working with like a real engineer and a real producer would be like a really big one for me. And then a really goofy, like stupid one is I really want to play Coachella, but not because it's like there's clout attached to it or prestige or whatever the case may be. I want to go because I want a paid vacation with my wife to Palm Springs. So that would be like the ultimate goal for me, is if we could like knock out a quick performance there and then I go spend a week with my wife at some mid-century, hotel with a pool.
Totally. You're like, hey, this is the fact I got to play a gig 2 weekends in a row is totally fine because we can just jet off to Joshua Tree afterwards. Like, this is great.
Yeah. Quite literally. Yeah. And we do that still. Like we're going to Europe next year. We're playing Roadburn and we're taking all our wives with us and we're going to hang out in Amsterdam for a week. So we're really like, that's kind of our angles. We try to parlay some of these more like special moments like that to be a thing where like, just treat it like a vacation that, we have like maybe a couple obligations, and obligation's not the right word, by the way. That makes it sound like we don't want to do it. Like, it is fun to play Roadburn. It's fun to do all this stuff, but also it's cool to be able to like hang out with your partner, quietly and enjoy, an exotic location.
Yeah. And it ties directly into, because I know you guys are very, very intentional in regards to, seeing not only the country, but just like going to these places, whether it's like, going to the, gas station or the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, whatever, like just being able to experience more of what touring can sometimes be so limiting to, where you're like, all right, we drive overnight and then we're just going to see the 2 blocks around the venue and that's kind of it. But it seems like you guys are really intentional about you approaching touring like that.
Oh yeah. In fact, it's like pretty hard line rule that we don't play more than 4 shows in a row, because we want built-in days off. And a lot of times, like when we put out our tour schedule, we'll have people hit us up immediately. Hey, you have a day off here. You want to play this city? You want to do this? And a lot of times the offers are good and everything, but we're just like, no, we really want a day off so we can keep this fun and we don't stress ourselves out too much and we get to like see the country, because what is this all for if not to be able to take advantage of this sort of like unique situation we're in,
Yeah, I think that's beautiful because it does really, going back to like the youthfulness of touring and stuff like that, again, most people don't understand that you really are just genuinely seeing where it's like, oh, did you, especially when you first start the tour, it's like, oh, did you play Philadelphia? It's like, no, we played like the suburbs. And you're like, did you even see the Liberty Bell? No, we didn't do this. It's like, it's just a series of failures. Yeah.
I was in an empty club for about 6 hours, and then we went to a hotel, and then I woke up 4 hours later, and then I was in a van for 10 hours.
Totally.
Usually kind of how. Yeah. And that's like, we haven't announced it yet, but we will be doing a European tour here before too long. And like all the cities on the list are like, oh my God, I can't believe we're going to be here. I can't believe we're going to be there. And it's like, oh yeah, don't forget, you aren't really going to be seeing a whole hell of a lot,
Totally. You're like, hey, could we schedule a day off in between each show? Cause I gotta see Rome. We gotta see that. Like,
well, the other part that's like, again, like we all have wives or like long-term girlfriends and stuff. And it's like, oh, hey, honey, I'm going to go see Rome for the first time. And you're not going to be there. So sorry about that. I'll let you know how cool it is,
Don't worry. I'll take pictures. Yeah.
And then I don't. That's the worst thing is that I'm really bad about taking pictures. So there you go.
That's incredible. Well, at least the expectation has been met. You're just like, listen, honey, not only will you not get to see it, but you're not going to see photos of it either.
I will try to, FaceTime you later in the hotel though. So don't worry.
Yeah, you get to see the exotic room at the hostel that I'm staying at. So, that's really exciting.
And when I catch you up on all the news, it'll be like, yeah, we were in the van today, and then we ate, and then we were at the club, and then now here I am.
Yeah, and wouldn't you know it, we had a vegan goulash again for the 5th time in the row.
All right. Thank you very much to Stin and his publicist, Stephanie, for hooking this interview up. It was a great use of my time, hopefully a great use of your time as well. And like I said, please listen to the new Chow Pow record. I urge you. It is so, so good. Next week, I have an old friend, a person who I have not connected with in over 20 some odd years. His name is Jordan Buckley. He plays in a band called Better Lovers. He also played in Every Time I Die for many, many years before the band dissolved, broke apart due to a lot of drama that if you existed on the internet, you undoubtedly tripped across it at some point. But Jordan's new band, actually not really new because they've existed for over a year now, but they just released their first full length. And so Jordan and I get into it. I mean, he was ready to chop it up. I mean, we talked for probably close to an hour and a half. And of course, he's a talker. So like that, I was already calculating that into the equation. But he was very, very thoughtful, dug into a lot of places that I didn't think he was going to, but it was great. So that's what we got next week. Jordan Buckley from Better Lovers. Until then, please be safe, everybody.
This podcast is supported by BetterHelp, offering licensed therapists you can connect with via video, phone, or chat. Here's BetterHelp Head of Clinical Operations Hesue Joe discussing who can benefit from therapy.
I think a lot of people think that you're supposed to be going to therapy once you're like having panic attacks every day. But before you get to that point, I think once you start even noticing that you feel a little bit off and you can't maintain this harmony that you once had in relationships, that could be a sign that maybe you want to go talk to somebody. There's always a benefit in talking to someone because we can all benefit from improved insight about ourselves and who we are and how we behave with other people. So if you're human, that's like a good indicator that you could benefit from talking to somebody.
Find out if therapy is right for you. Visit BetterHelp.com today. That's BetterHelp.com.